after you. You're the prey in a deadly game. You must do anything to survive. Can you stop the hunt before you are taken down? Manhunt by Rockstar Games. Rated M for mature.
For those of you who may not be aware, Manhunt is a stealth survival horror game developed by Rockstar North and published by Rockstar Games, the people that brought you Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption. Manhunt is the first entry to the series, released in November 2003 on the PlayStation 2, followed by Windows and Xbox releases the following April. You play as a man named James Earl Cash, a death row inmate who seemingly has run out of time and is to be executed for his crimes. After being executed, Cash wakes up in a strange place, an abandoned city with nothing on him but the prison jumpsuit on his back and an earpiece. Through the loudspeaker in the room he wakes up in, a voice speaks to Cash, telling him he will be freed if he manages to survive the games.
That's better. Now only you can hear me. And that's the way you're gonna want it, because I'm your only way out of here. Hey, easy. Look, you've had an unexpected reprieve. Do exactly as I say, and I promise this will be over before the night is out.
This voice is that of a man named Lionel Starkweather, the owner of Valiant Video Enterprises. Starkweather is the person who is in charge of recording and editing the Manhunts, a series of snuff films born from the dark corners of Starkweather's mind. The game involves Cash being forced to stalk and brutally kill hunters, members of multiple violent gangs that are hunting him down, each with their own design, weapons, and motivations. The different gangs end up being the primary enemy throughout most of the game. They consist of the Hoods, a loose-knit group of street thugs, hitmen for hire, and off-duty corrupted cops. The Skins, a group of skinhead neo-Nazis living in a trailer park. The War Dogs, a sadistic paramilitary group that took over an abandoned zoo. The Innocents, a gang mostly consisting of Latino thugs, cultists, and mentally ill degenerates. And the Smileys, a pack of hunters made up of escaped inmates of Dark Woods Penitentiary, a mental asylum that was overthrown by the Smileys and converted into their main base of operations. Each gang has their own dedicated level in the game where Cash has to go through their area clearing out every one of them. After each level, however, Cash is taken away and brought to the next location by a mysterious group of masked men known only to us as Cerberus, basically acting as Starkweather's private security force. Starkweather always makes it seem like Cash is only a step away from being given his freedom, only for Cerberus to show up and drag him into the next nightmare. It quickly becomes clear that while Starkweather wants Cash around for his manhunt, he sees how dangerous Cash is, and he wants him to die the second he's squeezed the money out of him. Eventually, Cash makes a run from the War Dogs after killing their leader, Ramirez. While running, he's picked up by the journalist, the reporter who's onto Starkweather and his crime ring. She claims to have evidence against Starkweather in her apartment, and she needs to get it down to the studio. Starkweather, however, doesn't want this to happen, and he has the entire Carcer City Police Department on payroll. After getting the reporter safely to her apartment, Cash mysteriously leaves, claiming he has unfinished business with Starkweather. From the apartment, Cash makes his way to Starkweather's mansion. However, Starkweather of course saw him coming and has tons of Cerberus goons guarding the property. Cash, like the badass he is, however, makes his way through all of them. Cash then goes down to Starkweather's basement, turning on the power to the elevator so that he may go up to his penthouse. At least, Cash thought the elevator would bring him right to Starkweather's room. We end up on a floor consisting of a bunch of rundown hallways with boarded up windows, holes in multiple walls. Place looks like shit. Pigsy appears as a naked, obese man with a chainsaw, wearing a dead pig's head as a mask. Pigsy used to be a star in Starkweather's films. They would feed corpses of people murdered in their films to Pigsy. Over time, however, Pigsy's mental deteriorated. By the time we see Pigsy, he seems very simple-minded, being kept chained in Starkweather's attic due to him becoming more and more unstable over time. He had become unpredictable, and at this point was only used as a tool to kill and clean up killings. However, Cash manages to make his tubby ass fall through the floor and ends up chainsawing his hands off. Cash then uses Pigsy's chainsaw to try to break through the door to Starkweather's room and prompts another group of Cerberus to come after him. Cash proceeds to shit on them, and then Cash brutally takes his revenge on Starkweather. The game then ends, but before the credits roll, we are showed that luckily the reporter was able to make it to the studio, and a huge investigation ended up being launched both into Starkweather's snuff film ring and Carcer City Police Department. Manhunt takes place in a wonderful place called Carcer City. Carcer is a complete shithole Rust Belt city that actually exists within the same canon as Grand Theft Auto. We know they're in the same universe because of brands such as Sprunk. We also know there are multiple car models that are used between the games, and most importantly, radio advertisements.
Tired of all the sunshine and good weather? Looking for a real American vacation? Visit the shining jewel in the Rust Belt crown, Carcer City. It's a real man's vacation. The pride of a nation is in Carcer City. It's steel, ice, and poverty. Spend a romantic evening in the beauty of the nighttime river glow at the flaming river. Watch real men who make things lose their jobs and fight on our special Closing the Mill guided tour. Come see what we're really made of. This is real America. Drunk, proud, unemployed, and angry. Hear the eagle roar. In Carcer City, this is what the Heartland is all about.
The police force is beyond corrupt, allowing violent gangs to have free reign over multiple abandoned areas throughout the city. The police force in Carcer is being paid off by Starkweather and Mr. Nasty to keep the city the perfect place for their snuff film ring. Starkweather being the man in charge of directing and editing the manhunts, and Mr. Nasty being an unknown, extremely rich piece of shit that even has Starkweather in his pocket. You may have noticed I haven't really mentioned Mr. Nasty until this point, so I'll do that now briefly. Mr. Nasty is the name given to a mysterious, completely unseen character mentioned in the Valiant Video Enterprises Winter/Spring catalog, which is actually the instruction manual that came with physical copies of Manhunt. While Mr. Nasty is never seen in the game and never even mentioned in the game, he is technically the main antagonist of the game, even handing out orders to Starkweather. I think this is terrifying and very rooted in reality. Many times a horror story breaks out, there's one person in the crosshairs, but we can never be sure if we got to the root of the problem or if we've just scratched the surface. In most instances, I'm sure we have just scratched the surface. For example, human trafficking case breaks. You know, we bust the guy that has the biggest public perception, the guy that is most likely to be doing it. Deep down, I think we all know that there's an organization much more deeply rooted, led by people we have no idea their names. And that is Mr. Nasty. He's supposed to be that guy where you don't know his name, you know nothing about him other than he's the leader and capable of doing horrible things. Manhunt's gameplay consists of trying to get the most points by killing enemies in the most brutal ways possible and working your way to the end of each level. Early on, you will realize that the enemies in this game are actually kinda beefy and that the combat system itself is not super refined. Because of this, for the majority of the game, you're going to be wanting to make use of the game's stealth mechanics. The strongest thing on your side is being simply the dark. The game has many dark corners for you to hide in, and from there you can either bait enemies in with a noise or a distraction. Darkness is truly your greatest advantage in Manhunt, as if you're in a dark area, a hunter can be looking right at you and you won't be detected. In practice, that can feel kinda goofy because it's like, how do you not see me? But I can write it off as it's probably just technically darker in the actual game. Like, if it was actually pitch black, it would be unplayable. So, running or walking over certain things like gravel or broken glass will also make extra noise that may alert hunters to your location. Combat in Manhunt is pretty basic. You just basically mash mouse 1 to hit people. You can also grapple people by hitting both attack buttons and then spamming them. That can be pretty fun. It can lead to some guaranteed hits as long as you time the grapple properly and you're not, knocked out of it by getting hit in the face. The 1v1 in Manhunt is pretty easy. You can kind of just spam the attack or grapple to beat the ass of pretty much any one enemy. The real problem really comes when there's more than one hunter coming for you. Even just two can be a little too much to handle and you can get kind of stun locked between the two. You'll hemorrhage HP alarmingly fast if there's any more than one guy coming for you. Especially if they have guns, obviously. Gunplay in Manhunt is also very basic. It kind of just feels like gunplay from Vice City or San Andreas. There are a few different guns in the game. They can all be aimed and fired. Most of them are loud, however, and will alert guards to your location, with one exception being the tranquilizer rifle that you can get in the mission strapped for cash. While gunplay feels very basic and of the times, something I like and dislike about the guns is that they all kill an enemy with one shot to the head, even the pistols. I like this because it feels realistic. I hate when there are games where enemies will just eat shots over and over again. I'm missing in this clip here, by the way, they're not just eating shots. While I will roll my eyes when a lot of enemies can just tank shots, this game on occasion will give you enough ammo to kind of just like John Wick the game at some points. I liked that in most of the game I did have to play stealth, and that's why some moments in the game I was just a little conflicted with how I was playing, running around shooting everyone in the face. There were multiple times where it just felt easier to do that, though, like, for example, these motherfuckers. I will say that it was always more satisfying to fully take advantage of the stealth and execution systems, but I mean, sometimes it was just free to use a gun. I also feel like I gotta talk about the atmosphere of this game. The environments are terrifying and the enemies have scary designs. The soundtrack in this game is fantastic. Many tense moments are escalated by the soundtrack in this game, and every moment is escalated by the environment that you consistently find yourself in. You know, you're in the scary streets of the city, you're in abandoned asylums. Pigsy's attic is terrifying. The vibes in Pigsy's attic are not good, man. Starkweather's entire mansion feels almost dystopian to be in, because throughout the entire game you're in this rundown evil city, but then you get to the heart of that evil and he's in a beautiful mansion. It's ironic. Between the enemies, the soundtrack, and the environments, I was constantly on edge at least a little bit while playing this game. And I love it for that. There aren't many games where I constantly feel on edge like that. I was stunned by the end of Manhunt because of how the game left me feeling. It was really satisfying to get to the end and see Cash finally beat Starkweather at his own fucked up games. However, the end gave us very little answers in reality. We know that the reporter was able to get the story out and Starkweather was obviously taken down. We know that Carcer City Police was investigated, and we know that Chief Gary Schaefer was arrested. But what about Carcer City itself? What event even caused Carcer to be so fucked up to begin with? After Starkweather was caught, what actions were taken, if any, to fix up the city and get rid of its heavy gang presence? Did they investigate thoroughly enough to find a trail to the actual leader of it all, Mr. Nasty? While I'm not holding my breath waiting for a sequel to explain these things, I am holding my breath for something to explain these things. Manhunt taking place in the same universe as Grand Theft Auto gives me hope that one day we might figure out what's really going on with Carcer. However, GTA 6 is going to be in Florida, and we know that Carcer City is definitely not in Florida, so who knows if we ever will get the answers we seek there. What I will say is this game makes me see the GTA series in a little bit of a different light, because now we know the kind of shit that happens in that world. We knew that the GTA world was not a one-for-one copy of our world, but we didn't know just how different it was. Carcer City is in the United States. There are no cities in the United States currently that I know of that are anywhere near the level of fucked up that Carcer is. And while playing this game, I was constantly questioning what could have even happened to bring an entire city to this place. That is lore that I desperately want, to be honest with you. But yeah, overall, Manhunt had some of the best environments I've ever experienced in a game. It had really fun gameplay. Soundtrack was fire. Story was simple, short, sweet, but amazing and thought-provoking and unexpectedly dark for a video game. Really thought-provoking, lots of lore that we may never get answers to. I didn't play through Manhunt until long after it came out, but by the time I got to it, regardless of it being outdated graphically, and I mean, shit, it wasn't even playable when I first got to it. Despite those things, I had an amazing time with Manhunt, and I think it's a one-of-a-kind experience, and I give it like a 9 out of 10. Maybe an 8.5, but I'm thinking 9. It's really good. If you haven't played Manhunt before, and you know, you don't think you'll get queasy, go for it. It's really unique. Manhunt 2 is very similar to Manhunt 1 in terms of gameplay. Story, however, is very different. You play as a man named Daniel Lamb, who used to be a scientist for an organization we only know as The Project. Our character was one of the lead researchers on a project called the Pikmin Bridge that in theory would allow one person to switch on a different personality for the purposes of creating soldiers. Although you're like the lead researcher of the project, your character ends up being the primary test subject, and the second personality you take on ends up being that of an extremely deadly and psychotic project mercenary named Leo. However, something happens that the project wasn't expecting, and Daniel ends up meeting Leo. Leo then convinces Danny that he needs to dismantle the project so that they both may be freed from their grasp. This leads Daniel down a path of slaughtering anyone and everyone in his way. Because of the Pikmin Bridge, you end up playing as Daniel in some missions, but then Leo in others. You get a lot more dialogue from Daniel and Leo than you do from Cash in the first game. In my opinion, this ends up being a bad thing because in some parts the voice acting and writing is questionable in my opinion, and throughout Manhunt, I liked Cash, but I was annoyed with both Danny and Leo like the entire fucking duration of Manhunt 2. Overall, I did not like this game nearly as much as the first one, and because of that, I don't have too much to say about it, but I will go over some features that were added that were not present in the first game. One thing about the game is overall the executions are a lot more brutal in Manhunt 2. Executions in the first game are brutal, don't get me wrong, but the shit your character does with some of the weapons in this game is like actual war criminal activity. They also added gun executions to the second game. They're still loud, so realistically they don't serve much purpose other than being brutal and giving you extra points. But I do think it's a cool feature, and I'm not sure why it wasn't in the first game. This game also added extra quote-unquote stealth mechanics, where if there's ever a situation where you're in a dark corner and an enemy is staring at you trying to find you, sometimes you'll have to move your cursor to like match up with a circle that's moving around your screen in order for you to not be spotted. It doesn't happen every time, so I don't really mind that it's there. The only times I was actively annoyed by it were times where I needed bro to turn around before his homie shows up so that I could actually kill him. And sometimes if that mechanic kicks in, they will be looking for you for a little longer than they normally would. The feature does feel kind of weird though, because I don't know how Danny moving in that situation would ever help, but at least you feel like you're doing something, because in the first game, and even sometimes in this game, an enemy will just blankly stare in your direction for 10 seconds even though you're right in front of them, and then they'll just shrug like, oh, must have been the wind. It's kind of fucking goofy, but I mean, yeah, I don't think it was necessarily implemented perfectly in the second game. Gameplay in Manhunt 2 is not too much worse than the first game, but the story and atmosphere is a huge letdown when you compare it to the first game. The original Manhunt is a game with an extremely dark story that has a mysterious beginning, a satisfying end, and leaves you with questions about the world it takes place in. I don't really feel the same about the second game. With the sequel, it feels like they tried to make a more in-depth and thought-provoking story, but it ends up falling flat on its face because you end up just not caring. At least I ended up not caring. There were also multiple parts of this game that just seemed like they were trying to be extra edgy. Like, realistically, they didn't have to make the executions more brutal than they were in the first game. There's a group of enemies in this game, like a gang called the Pervs, and like they're essentially a bunch of porn addicts, and sometimes you'll like walk in on them watching porn, and it's not like there's ass and titties in your face in this game, thank God, but it's still like it's still kind of uncomfortable and weird. I will say the concept of the Pikmin bridge is truly interesting, and the idea of it malfunctioning, allowing both personalities to communicate, is a cool idea. I think where it fails is when you realize that we don't know shit about the project. We know that their goal is to be able to create theoretically infinite super soldiers via the Pikmin bridge, and that's about it. We don't know shit about the doctors working on the project, and nor do we know what their overarching goal is. All we know about Daniel is that he was a doctor researching the Pikmin bridge, and all we know about Leo is that he's an extremely effective and sadistic soldier that the project used to have on payroll. While the first game left me with questions, the second game left me feeling like I just went through an unfinished experience. The end was supposed to leave you feeling on edge because it shows you that the project is still out there working hard to cover their tracks and continue their experiments. But I was just straight mad that it ended. Not because I wanted to play more of the game, I truly did not. I was mad because it left off with basically a happy ever after ending, where Daniel is given a new name and a new house with no memory of what he just went through. While technically it's good that Daniel got a happy ending because he just went through like the worst trauma of his life, it's also like, does he really deserve it? He was a doctor working on the Pikmin bridge, and that's all I really need to know to make the conclusion that he's probably a morally bankrupt piece of shit, like the rest of the project. I mean, he literally fucking volunteered to get the Pikmin bridge put in his brain. Not saying that Cash is a good person necessarily, he was literally on death row before the game even starts, but at least he truly fought back. It would have been more satisfying if Daniel went after the project in the end, even if he died trying. Then at least at the end, a conversation could be had about the moral character of Daniel. Instead, he starts the story as a complete piece of shit, acts like a confused coward for most of the game, and then at the end, his big metamorphosis is that he literally just becomes some guy with a house and a 9-to-5. Now, unsurprisingly, a game this violent coming out back in 2003 raised a lot of eyebrows. A lot of people were really concerned about this game's representation of violence, and a lot of them were straight up saying that it was going too far, what with the extremely brutal executions that the player is allowed to do. U.S. Representative Joe Baca said while talking about Manhunt, "It's telling kids how to kill someone, and it uses vicious, sadistic, and cruel methods to kill." Media sources picked this up and ran with it, saying shit like, "There's no challenge, it's just about ritualistically stacking bodies." A lot of people were upset about the fact that the player has to actually interact with the game to make the executions more brutal. And this goes double for the second game, on the Wii especially, if you have motion controls. The game was banned in New Zealand until 2023, and it was also banned in Australia. Even though before they banned it in Australia, it had already sold 18,000 copies. On July 28, 2004, Manhunt was linked to the murder of a 14-year-old Stefan Pekira by his 17-year-old friend Warren LeBlanc in Leicestershire, England. LeBlanc lured Pekira to a local park and proceeded to beat him to death with a hammer. It's uncertain what LeBlanc did immediately after the murder, but he was found soon after covered in blood by police and confessed to the murder. The victim's mother said that the game had been played by the perpetrator and that it had influenced his actions in the crime. The mother then tried to sue Sony and Rockstar for £50 million. However, soon after they dropped the case. I'm sure this is partially because after an investigation, it was discovered that the game was actually in the victim's room and not the perpetrator's. The police also shifted their investigations toward the possibility of the attack being a drug-related crime. While in court, LeBlanc's lawyer brought up that LeBlanc had owed £75 to a local gang called the Crusaders Gang. Initially, luring Pekira to the park was supposed to be a robbery to help pay back his debts. LeBlanc allegedly told Pekira that they were going to meet two girls at the park, but at some point during the robbery, LeBlanc panicked and hit Pekira, and then apparently panicked even harder after seeing blood and went all out. Pekira was left with over 50 wounds from both a hammer and a knife. LeBlanc was then found by police 2 hours later. LeBlanc was given a life sentence, having to serve a minimum of 13 years in prison. Technically, his license will remain with him for the rest of his life, meaning if he crosses a certain threshold, they may recall him at will. However, as of 2018, LeBlanc was back in the community with a whole-ass job and everything. The Pekira family was also openly upset when the second game was announced, with Jack Thompson trying unsuccessfully to get it banned immediately. Pekira's mother was also understandably beat up about her son's murderer being released after what was almost a minimum sentence. He did end up getting over the 13 years, but not much. It was something like 15, 16 years. Not that y'all need my 2 cents, but my 2 cents is it's not super unreasonable to think that a game with realistic violence like this could trigger something in a mentally unstable person. However, that is not on Rockstar, and it's even more so not on Sony. I think the executions add something special to the game, as fucked up as they are. And like I said, after an investigation, it turned out that the game was actually in the victim's room, not even the perpetrator. Basically, the media just went apeshit as soon as they were able to tie video games to a murder. I think they just wanted to do it so bad, and the second that a disturbed parent thought that it could be that, they lunged at the opportunity to make those articles. Now, toward the end of the video, I wanted to rant a little bit about how this game's Steam releases are, and they are really pitiful, may I say. The first game you can get on Steam for $10. It's a pretty good price for the game, really. The second game, however, is not even on Steam. So the official release on Steam is broken. Initially, I was not even able to get past the fucking tutorial, as there is a gate that just wouldn't open. An enemy was supposed to spawn and open the gate, and bro just never showed up. I was only able to actually play the game after downloading a third-party program called Manhunt Fixer. It worked a charm, and I have no viruses, but the fact that I even had to do this is a massive problem. In my opinion, you really shouldn't even be able to purchase a game that is broken in the way Manhunt is. I mean, like, I want it to stay on Steam because I hate when games are removed from Steam, and you could just ask for a refund if you realize, you know, the game launches, you get through most of the tutorial, and then you just can't continue. But it's ridiculous that it hasn't been fixed by now. It's been released for a while. I get they're working on other stuff, but it's just straight up lazy that they've let it stay like this for this long. You know, Red Dead 2, fantastic. GTA 6 has a massive budget. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic, but like, holy shit, it cannot be that hard to just make your game playable. Like, it launches too, and the files are there. Like, the game is there, it just bugs. You just can't get through the tutorial. But yeah, I think it's actually insane that they've let it be like this for as long as it has, and because of this, the Steam reviews understandably are shit. Not complete shit, because, you know, the people that actually go through the effort to download the fixer and play through the game end up loving the game, but yeah, most people see that it doesn't work and give up, and I cannot blame them. And like I said, Manhunt 2 is not even on Steam. You just can't get it on Steam. I had to get it online somewhere, like a cracked download. I don't even know if it was legal. And that's super annoying because Manhunt 2 isn't as good as the first one, so it's like I have to go even more out of my way to play the second one than I did the first one. But it was barely even worth it. Like, I did it for the video. I'm glad I did it. I can say that I played both of them, but I'm not replaying the second one. The media absolutely ripped Manhunt to shreds and completely fucking atomized Manhunt 2. When it comes to controversy and public outroar, Manhunt is up there with the big dogs, and there's definitely some merit to that. The Manhunt games are probably the most violent games I've ever played, and this says a lot as I've been a fan of the Mortal Kombat games for years, playing most of them including the most recent release, Mortal Kombat 1. Manhunt's graphics may be nowhere near as good as modern Mortal Kombat, but let me explain why it's still not quite the same. While many Mortal Kombat fatalities have insane levels of gore, not only are fatalities basically cutscenes, but they all feel like fantasy. The ways characters kill in Mortal Kombat is flashy and ridiculous. Seeing fatalities can definitely make some people nauseous depending on which one it is, but I think it's fair to say that most gamers see them kind of as a spectacle. This is not how it is in Manhunt though. The executions in this game are absolutely brutal, and they're scarily realistic and well animated. Even many of the most basic executions had me thinking this shit would have been fucking insane in 2003, and that's because to this day it kind of is. We know that in 2016 Take-Two renewed their license for Manhunt. Many thought that this meant that they were likely working on a Manhunt 3, but we haven't heard anything about that ever since. It's probable they just wanted to renew it to hold on to their intellectual properties, and that people were just hopeful. However, I want to beg the question, would Manhunt be too much in the modern day? Honestly, it fucking might be. Imagine a modern Manhunt game with the graphics of a Red Dead 2 or a GTA 6 paired with their current animation tech. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that a Manhunt 3 would cause another outroar. I honestly seriously doubt they will make a third. Public outcry is one thing, but during the development of the first two games, it's actually well known that there was somewhat of a mutiny at Rockstar because many people developing the game were just straight up uncomfortable with the game's content. I could only imagine that a Manhunt 3 with modern graphics could cause problems equal to or greater than what they were dealing with when it comes to the first two games. But the beautiful thing is that the series really doesn't need a third entry. The first game is an amazing one-of-a-kind survival horror experience, where if the enemies don't have you on edge, the atmosphere and world building absolutely does. I was fully immersed in loving every second of Manhunt. It has a story that starts and ends cleanly within its runtime. Even the mere concept of being kidnapped and forced into a snuff film ring is an extremely interesting and terrifying premise. While the second game was basically just a big edgy disappointment with a pretty open ending, even that game's ending is good enough. I know I shit on it, but it's not complete trash, it's just underwhelming and really mid, and I mean, my biggest point here is that it doesn't really need to be tied up. Like, the ending you get is, like, fine. It's absolutely undeniable that the Manhunt series has left its mark on the gaming world as a whole between the games themselves and the controversy surrounding them. Gaming probably would not be the same today without it. Manhunt is an absolute gem of the early 2000s, and if you're at all into survival horror, I wholeheartedly recommend it. It offers a really unique, dark experience that I haven't really gotten from any other game before. Maybe not the second one. You can play the first one, and you're good.